Tribeca, the triangle below Canal. Well, it's actually not a triangle. If you were here in the 1920s, you'd be hearing the sounds of a big band. And well, if you were here after that, you might be hearing some spectral sounds, but don't worry, there's someone who can help you, and well, there they are. But now, you'd be in one of the trendiest neighborhoods of New York. But there's a lot more to Tribeca than that. It wasn't always that way. Tribeca is a neighborhood with a lot of history and a lot of ups and downs. Tribeca probably has more history than almost any neighborhood in New York. But most people don't realize that. Tribeca is one of those neighborhoods in New York that is really quite fascinating. Before Tribeca was what it is today, Tribeca was a real down and out neighborhood. Where did Tribeca get its name from? Well, it came from a zoning dispute when owners tried to get it rezoned for lofts. And before that, well, the piers along the Hudson River allowed large freighters that couldn't go into the East River to be brought in to the Hudson River. So cargo was being brought into the Hudson River because it was deeper, and Tribeca started its life there. But before that, the Tribeca area held a reservoir for New York City, which was actually too small from the time it was built. So Tribeca has transformed many times. And today, what Tribeca known for? Well, probably most famous for the film festival started by its most famous resident, Robert De Niro. But as you walk through the neighborhood, you probably look at it and see its restaurants, beautiful buildings, the luxury towers that have gone up, and the old restored lofts, the great architecture, and as we come around this corner, one of its most famous residents, the Roxy. The Roxy's got a whole history to it as well, because the Roxy is really known for the Roxy Theater. And the Roxy Theater has a history right there, because the Roxy used to play movies and the orchestra would play. The orchestra would play during intermission. And if you look around at the Roxy Hotel, you can hear that orchestra coming out. You can still hear it playing. And if you're in the Roxy Hotel, if you stay there, you can hear music most of the time. And it's a great place to be. And just look around right now. Do you see it? The 1920s, still around here. Tribeca's heyday, back when the big bands were here, it hasn't left. The Roxy still holds it. The history of Tribeca is rich. The Roxy preserves it, restored it, celebrates it. Everything about Tribeca is right here. Everything about New York. And the Roxy Theater is still here. And you look at it, it's so New York. It's so Tribeca. You just have to take it in. And you can just hear the orchestra warming up in the background. Look at the glass. Look at the architecture. Sometimes a building can just speak to you. Sometimes a neighborhood can just speak to you. The cobblestone streets, as you walk down, think of the men walking down with wooden carts, pushing through the freight that had to come into New York to feed the country. Think of the Hudson River before it was filled. Think of the amount of freight that moved through the nation. Tribeca was there. All of these crates, all the freight being moved by hand, before containers, all of this coming across. This is where it was happening, right down here. All warehouses, all vertical. No machines, everything moved with human labor. And next door was Radio Row, the famous area where the World Trade Center was put up and so tragically came down, actually at one of the low points of Tribeca, which led to its rebirth, surprisingly. Radio Row was taken down to allow the World Trade Center to be built. The area's had its ups and downs because those freight areas were taken down because the traffic and congestion on the west side of Manhattan became too heavy. So the markets were all moved to the Bronx, to Hunts Point. And Tribeca saw its downturn at that point in time. And all of a sudden, Tribeca went into a downturn during the 1960s into the 1970s. But Tribeca holds many secrets. Secrets of a hidden past that at times is a short distance from tragedy. Tragedy that came from hard lives, hard lives on the docks of longshoremen pushing carts filled with fruit, loaded with freight, working for wages that were tough to live on, supporting families, immigrants that came to this country to make a living. Yet, here again, Tribeca stands, having once again, like much of New York, gone through a rebirth to become what it is today. A wonderful place to spend your time, a beautiful part of New York, absolutely incredible. Tribeca is a living part of New York and a great place to be. Ultimate Park Guide. Subscribe, ring the bell.